podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother Justin. What's going on?
Man, just, flowing into the day, or the weekend, or the whatever it may be. Man, how
that's
you
right.
doing?
Whatever time it is, wherever we at. That's right. If you want to sponsor knowing what time it is, then get at us. You can have a moment for a certain amount of money. You can sponsor us saying, and the time has been brought to you by insert company.
Time itself brought to you by
blankety blank.
Keeping reality alive for you now. What a way to be. Yeah, indeed. So well, let's just get into it. So a couple of things transpired since our last conversation I wanted to touch base on. So where I wanted to start though is a mix of start the NBA season and but particularly, and then maybe move to a little bit of the broader start of the NBA season. I want to start with Ben Simmons, the Philadelphia's own, maybe. Sometimes, depending on how you probably not right now. I think most of Philly ain't really ain't here for him, but
depending on how he's feeling.
But it's a real interesting. There's some interesting complexities to the circumstance, right? There's the general sport level, which we've already spoke to, sort of like, you kind of went real weird in an actual NBA series that your team in all sense should have won, right? Like you should have won and had a chance to be playing for the NBA title last year, because you probably could have beaten the Nets, where I don't think Atlanta had any chance of beating the Nets. I think the Sixers playing, at full strength may have had a shot, especially with the injuries that happened with the Nets. All right. But how did that go the other way around? The Bucks.
No, went the other way around.
The Bucks. My fault.
Could they play? Yeah. They could. Yeah. I think they could have had a good. They matched up against the Bucks well, right? Yeah. Like they have a lot of defensive players. Ben Simmons was the defensive player of the year type. So
right.
No one stops Giannis, but could you have done a good job? I'm sure.
Yeah, possibly. And then, so let's fast forward to the moment of the situation. It was, first the Sixers wanted to trade him. Everyone, it's been the talk of the summer. He's in, says, I'm not coming to training camp. Once some checks started getting missed, he said, whoa. I want out, but maybe not out all this money.
Not to miss no meal.
I'm not trying to miss no checks. He comes in, I guess a few days into him being back in, it clearly seems like he was, maybe making some insubordinate moves and gets, suspended from a game. And generally, it seems like it's a mess. But then there's a turn, there's a twist, and it, basically. The brother says, look, I'm not mentally ready to rejoin the team, which, elevated the idea of, kind of the crossover of, mental health, professional performance, place and space, like where you're working and what you're doing and how do you even feel about yourself in the moment, and especially and I think a degree of cynicism of some fans are kind of like, I don't think he still just, this is all just a ploy, right? Some people would say, or other people say, well, we say that we're trying to take these sort of things more seriously, right? When folks are saying they're having performance issues. And I don't think that within the context of sports, for sure, that if you took a lens back to the past at different instances, although it may not have been acceptable or thought as reasonable in those different times to frame when a player of especially of Ben Simmons caliber, is not performing or is doing weird, something strange, that it could actually be sourced in a act like a real kind of personal malaise that individual is going through, right? As opposed to, oh, he's just doing that to get out. Like, I mean, I think the most recent example that would be a counter note would be Jimmy Butler when he wanted out of what's this?
Minnesota.
Yeah, and he just turned out to practice, and like I think when he took the second squad, it just destroyed the first squad in practice. It was just kind of acting a fool, and it was like, all right, this shit ain't gonna work. Right now, in that case, though, Jimmy didn't come out nowhere and say that he was having, like a real, kind of mental, emotional challenge being there. He was quite adamant. I want out. These dudes ain't with it. I need to go. And that was a coach he liked. He liked Tom Thibodeau. Like, that was at least we were led to believe that was his man's. And so as one touch point, that would be sort of like, well, what Ben Simmons seems to be articulating and doing is not that, although he may want a similar thing in terms of leaving. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's enough of me talking at this moment just to sort of set up, what we're looking at. So what was some of your thoughts about what you've heard about the situation?
So I think that there's 2 points to this. And I think it's connected to something we talked about around kind of Black men and mental health, and the prevailing idea that Black men who play professional sports, and especially football and basketball, come from such conditions that they learn this high degree of resilience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with that high degree of resilience, they can take on anything. There's nothing they can't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing they can't handle because they've seen the rough and tumble streets of insert place, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that has been a narrative that has been in the league and that has been accepted in our communities for a very long time. But I do also think there was a set of things that players went through, and I don't mean this idea of Black men's resilience. Is maybe you played in college for 4 years, or maybe you weren't always good, right? Maybe you like Karl Malone. I'm not talking about the rest of Karl Malone's behavior, but just like the fact that he wasn't always good, then he got good, and then he played basketball. So now we have a set of young people across, like young men, Black men, playing in sports, and we're kind of basketball is the one we're focusing on, that come from different backgrounds. They've been like microwaved into basketball stardom. They've been microwaved into success, right? Like Ben Simmons played basketball 1 season in college, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And next thing you know, he is the number 1 or whatever pick, right? He's been compared to LeBron and Magic Johnson his whole career. And like a lot of really good basketball players, he's also been, and I'm not going to use the word coddled. He has been highly attended to his entire career. And I don't think we always think about what do people need to be performing. Where's the psychologist? Where's all the things? I think when you look at LeBron and you identify why he is able to perform at such a high level, at some point, LeBron started engaging in mindfulness. He started like really deep dealing in meditation, right? Like there was a place he had done all the other stuff. He made it Ohio proud and all that kind of stuff. But when he really had to go to another level of how he performed, he had to actually get help, right? He had to like get a sports psychologist and some support. So I think what you're saying with Ben Simmons is, he saw what Jimmy Butler did. He saw what James Harden did last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to do that. Well, this team might deal with you a little differently than they dealt with Jimmy Butler or James Harden, number one. And number two, what is actually going on? And is there the challenges around, how he performed, and then being in a really difficult city to be a sports player, to just not cut any cards, of Philadelphia. But then is he getting the help he needs? And is his manager and him telling people that he won't play somewhere? Is that really the thing that he needed? Right. And so I think about him, and in some ways I think about Kyrie, and I'm not trying to cast any aspersions or dispersions on Kyrie Irving for the decisions that he's making in regard to him not playing this season. I'm kind of framing it even with what went on last year. He just needed to take time. I mean, there's a place where I think some of these younger players are just having a set of challenges. And I think really positively, in some senses, testing the narrative that young Black men are always so resilient and have it so figured out, right? Because they come from East St. Louis or Compton or you know what I mean,
right.
My Liberty City in Miami or a South, the dirt roads of South Carolina. Like I said, insert anywhere. And this idea that they're mentally where they need to be just because they actually are really good at putting a basketball in a basket, right? And so I think that is one of the real things for us to really look at is, what is going on with the mental and emotional health. A lot of these young people, you look at DeMar DeRozan, who openly talked about some of his mental health challenges, right? So I just think there's a there. And I think we have to watch our old narratives around Black men's resilience and young Black men's resilience, especially if they haven't been necessarily oriented to see what that success is going to look like and mean going forward, and how they're going to deal with the pressures of everyone in their family wants money. You're in a different city every day. You never can get settled, family, just all the kind of challenges. So that's one. Then another part, just real quickly, want to touch on is this idea of players being able to force their way off of teams. And I think what Ben Simmons has run into is the buzzsaw of no more. Like, again, you've seen Jimmy Butler do it. You saw James Harden do it. And Ben Simmons like, I want to do that. And he ran into a Sixers team that said, you'll just sit. We will wait this one out. You are not James Harden. we will wait this one out. Right. And so I think there's a challenge there, which represents this broader idea of the control that players / agents, and there's no accident that his manager is Rich Paul, right? LeBron's, he's in business with LeBron and just the whole thing. So I think there's no accident what's happening here. And I think that, the most important thing, there's a mental health issue that we have to challenge our vision on what resilience looks like. And two, hey, you're really good and people want you, but every day you do this, you actually are reducing your place in the market. And I don't want to be too suspicious, but I do think there's something really interesting, him being like, I don't want to play here. I don't want to play here. Hey, y'all, I'm not ready to play here. Now, the positive part of me says he was ready to be honest, right? That he was ready to come to grips with like, hey, I'm not ready to play yet, y'all. Like, I'm dealing with a set of issues. And I think most of the team, when you look at what they said, many of them responded positively to that, but he might should have just said there from the beginning and not try to force his way off, so that's my
I wanted to jump in on the mental side of it, right? I'll do two touch points. One, we just spoke, I think, in the last recording that we made about the show Billions, and that, the lead, one of the main characters in that is a performance coach for people in a high stress, high money making industry, right?
Right.
That whose job is to help those people deal with the stress of the decision making they have to make. And this person is so important to their ability to function, and I understand it's a fictional show to anyone that's listening, you know what I'm saying? They'll be like, but that's not real. But it's actually a real thing that like some industries have performance coaches.
That's right.
To make sure you do the thing well, right? So I mean, although I think the aspect is much higher, it's way more normalized than when we were like, kids, like in the 80s. It was the idea of like a player in a sport working with like a coach, right, was out there, but it was still a bit of the like, if you were a good enough player and you were doing it, wouldn't nobody look at it a little askew, but it was still a bit of negative judgment.
Right.
To up to now, where if a professional athlete does not have, I mean, even if they're not maybe getting into the deeper levels of the mental health in terms of like, somebody might, deal with depression or anxiety or these other things, but generally just the idea of a performance, like it's kind of assumed, I think, almost, or like, why aren't you working with a performance coach if you're trying to figure out how to, do this or that with your game, in any sport. I think it's a pretty normal, reasonable expectation. And even in the conversation that'll come up, like around what are the internal supports, either at the Sixers or in his own network. Now, all of that also always hinges on it's because there's support services out there, and someone that's come out of years of work in human working with people. People don't always engage with the services or the opportunities or the resources that might be available to them. Or they don't engage at the time that they may need to engage, or the time that would have been most beneficial to engage, given other factors that, people engage on the time when they engage. So, when, I would like to, one, I'm done doing my best. I don't really want to judge the man this like negatively on the idea that if he, has come to the understanding and is comfortable saying to public, like, I actually am having sort of a crisis of should I be doing this, or like how to show up like in this thing I do. And that, you've seen me do it really well, except for this one, this certain aspects of the way I do it. And I don't really know what to do. Like that's a real thing. Like, I think we could probably run through our mind and think of someone in a different professional field that we may know that one day suddenly was like, you talked to what's his name this week, man? Is he all right?
Right.
Like, I mean, like I heard he turned out the meeting at so-and-so, right? Or, you know what I'm saying? Said some like kind of, went over there off the wall, which would be considered maybe out of character, or at least damaging, act, within their professional space, which may have been a reaction to, pent up kind of angst about what they're doing or where they're showing up. Now, some of those sometimes where you have an elected leader who absorbed years of, virulent racism and one day just says, just says the thing that, maybe they shouldn't have said, you know what I'm saying? Or someone who's, been operating in either the corporate space or some other, large organizational space, and their, years of realizing sort of the stress of one, working harder, not being compensated as well, and not getting the return, due to the structural issues that, become impediments. They just wig out a little bit, you know what I'm saying, and go like, man, you know what I'm doing? I'm out of here, and they leave that space, and there's real mental and emotional, scarring. And it's not unreasonable for players, for a professional athlete at the apex of what they do, of their sport. When you broaden it to, Naomi Osaka, situations over this, like I said, that was this year. Other players but that's just a prominent player, I would say, that to speak to in the tennis world, going like, there's real stresses in this, and sometimes it's like, I need a break from the stress. Now, the way that going to get, and Simone Biles during the Olympics, right? Like how I'm going to do this, there's probably no way that it's going to look good, so to speak, but I have to do this, right? So if that's where the brother's at, if the brother Ben Simmons is like I really, because it's real weird. Like if you, my good brother, I'm Majestic, was an NBA player, and we, the other last 20 years of our life played differently because you was you was out here some type of, maybe a star, maybe you just a great quality rotation player, but we'll make you a star for this example. And then I watched the game where you had an easy bucket in a high and when you needed it for your team and you passed the ball, I would give you, we go get something to eat after the game, let we could have a beverage. Somebody was like, God, what happened? Like I was watching you, and you did something totally out of character. So I'm trying to understand, like, what happened. You know what I'm saying? I would just be concerned. I would, as your friend, as your brother, want to give you the space to like look at that and feel comfortable to go, man, I just didn't want to take the shot. And it was for, these reasons. It could, maybe you'll be able to surface it, maybe you won't. But it was definitely something that's like any basketball player you would think it was just you, wasn't nobody in front of you and you're 6'12", like just jump up and put it in the thing. Like, why did you get the ball away? And it speaks to in your behavior what was going on in your mind, right? And I don't think it's unusual when someone is at a mental stress breaking point with what they're doing with their lives for them to do something that just totally seems out of character and not the right decision with something that they know well enough to know what to do. We don't typically give that space though to professional athletes that, the traditional messages go like he was scared, which he may have been, but just because you're scared doesn't mean that it wasn't, like you could be scared.
But it wasn't
also,
tough, right?
Right. Right. Like it also could be, you were scared because you was freaking out, like like inside your, your frame of reference. So, and then tying that to, which becomes the muddled challenge of like, yeah, you got like 4 more years on the contract, my man. Like it's not really reasonable for them folks to feel like if in the lease, if you leaving, they ain't paying all that money, or like why, the contract has to mean something. And I understand teams. I'm a high level advocate of. I know teams could trade you at any moment. So finding some other space in there, but it's sort of like, I think when he started losing bread, he was like, all right, well maybe I go back. And then but then it's other things too that like who a person is and how they behave is sort of in their peer group and how people feel about them. All of that stuff, kind of mushes together, and you can have, as I see it, the situation where, you have some issue, some sort of dynamic with how you see yourself. Then you're out here working with this space with these other people. And then whatever those dynamics where it's like, people don't know you very well. Maybe they don't totally like you. And then maybe there's, it can be a negative feedback loop with that. And then you're kind of like, I'm a little different in my affect and my style. And I don't really, connect with people. And all these things can be different layers of already existing condition around, like, or position, not really a condition, because it's not necessarily like a, I don't know, not trying to diagnose the brother, but to say,
right.
Like, if it wasn't fitting, and if your sense of who you are and what you're doing aren't aligned, then you start having stuff starts happening, things start going on. And it's just, I guess the biggest thing is, in a way, I hope the brother is not elevating the mental health issue as a ploy. I guess would be the biggest thing that he really is recognizing. Is like, I can't explain why I feel and do this. I'm doing how I feel and the way I'm doing things. I don't understand it for myself. It's not something. There's nothing. It is a mental challenge, right? That may not require. It's not like it may not be psychiatric, right? That it requires medication. This requires some different type of therapy or some engagement or group work, any number of things, just to get your mind repositioned around this situation, which I think it's realistic for anybody to have that, and I think it's a grace that should be extended to professional basketball players too. Now, the other side of, or the other aspect to consider is, how if you need to work that out, and there's a way that this could have happened where it didn't have to be this contentious dynamic with your peers. And so that's part I'm sort of like, what a way to start the season. If the view the Sixers, you as teammates, and again, depending on what their interaction and their relationship has been over the last, I think it's 4 or 5 years he's been on the team. Some dudes might be like, yeah, man, he out here talking about his mental health, man, whatever, man. That dude, right? Like if some dudes
right, like Joel Embiid. That's clearly Joel Embiid does not buy this shit. Like, I mean, and again, I want to be honorable and respectful and start from a place of grace. But I do think there's something to be said when you have professional assistance in navigating your career. You can be in the place where you're at. Like, for example, if you or I have a challenge at work, you can go through a process by saying you need some time off. And there's stuff structured for you to get time off to respond to a variety of things going on in your family and yourself or your family or whatever, right? They are represented by people who are paid very handsomely to assist you through your process. So when you say, I just will never play for you again, now that is the thing that says I'll never play for you again because I'm dealing with the mental health challenges of playing for you and being harmed. That's one thing. But Rich Paul and Clutch Sports are supposed to do a better job navigating that. Mm-hmm. You're not supposed to have it to a point where you say you'll never play, they fine you, you come and play because at this point it's clear you don't want to lose the money.
Yeah.
Then you get kicked out of practice. Then you come back and say and have the conversation. Now, again, all this can be part of his trajectory and his horizon with his mental and emotional health. You know what I mean? So I want to be there, but there's some accountability and responsibility from the Sixers organization as well as Clutch Sports to help this young man through this.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that is what is happening, right? And so that's where I don't want to absolve them because, okay, if you're holding the Sixers hostage to leave, clearly that wasn't going to work in the way that you may have originally thought about it, even if it was for the same reason, right? Even if it was like, hey, my mental and emotional health is not well here. I can't perform here, right? Cool. But don't do that, then come to practice and don't show up in practice and then have to come to the team after you basically, again, because you're dealing with the primacy of an individual, but you're also engaging in a collective sport. And you're engaging in collective sport that you then want to go somewhere else and hope to flourish.
Yeah.
And the behavior of, I mean, I respect the manhood and leadership of taking accountability and saying, hey, I'm not ready to play right now. But that's something you could have told your team members in August. And this would all be blamed on the Sixers, right? So I just think that there's, again, I don't want to assume the negative. I don't want to assume the worst. But I do want to assume, I do say that there's been some fumbling of this on both sides. And there have been ball players. DeMar DeRozan has had challenges. Kevin Love has had challenges. So this in itself, frankly, is not new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's just unfortunate the way that it's happening with him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like a lot of things, it's the factors that are also in play at the moment. You know what I'm saying? Sort of a rival, so to speak, of display that, when someone has really does have a mental moment or a crisis of confidence, even if it's something of a more clinical nature, you can't really pick the timing when that happens. It just happens. And then it's like, oh, okay, the brother, or the sister, that person, the individual, they're going through this thing. And it arrives now. So it would be great if you could have, those moments, on a schedule that fit, like, oh, well, I just finally built up a 6-month savings account and all my bills are paid. Like, everything's great. I was already I was about to go on sabbatical. And so now I've had this, mental moment, and it times it perfectly where it may not cause much harm to me or others that may be depending on me. And the reality of our world is when folks do have a challenge or an issue, it happens when it happens. And then the world has to make space, and other things have to make space for whatever needs to happen for the person to be well, and also for those either persons or things or situations that were depending on them being in a place to exist or manage being well as well. right? Just so yeah. So I mean, I guess in a closing thought on the brother Ben, like I'm gonna put my thoughts around how you play basketball over here, and just say I hope the brother, gets healthy and gets what he needs. You know what I'm saying? Just as a person, as a man, as a human being, and we'll still be here with the basketball questions. You know what I'm saying? At a future date. Yeah,
just keep. Yeah, I just would say, again, I think there is something to be said for elevating this conversation of mental health and resilience, and let's not make an assumption just because people are successful, because people are doing well. I mean, I think we see so many examples in this day and time, but also in sports. Let's not make an assumption about the talent in its matching kind of emotional mental spaces that people are in, to assume that they have to be okay because they're making a lot of money. It just doesn't.
Yeah,
doesn't
absolutely. So, in the broader sense, and I don't have a super whole lot, but it is the start of the NBA season, and one of the decisions I made this year was actually I like basketball and I do enjoy watching it. Just the realities of how I engage with television and media, and typically, honestly, how my schedule goes, I usually don't end up watching very much basketball until the playoffs. I'll admit that, or at least deeper into the season. But I made a concerted effort this year. I even got the league pass so I could make some more time, because I really enjoy watching basketball. And I think the league itself, and I'm not breaking news here. I've heard it said by many different outlets that I do listen to that cover the sport. This may be the confluence of sort of the most talent in the league, I think, in our lifetime, just from the perspective of the super duper stars, players, playing down to most teams have at least one dude you're like, that guy's pretty good.
Right.
Now whether it's going to work out or not, or be what it will mean may not be clear, but yeah, it's a very interesting and for the most part, from what I've watched, so I've been making the effort to pop on a couple games, and it's actually something that when I'm doing other stuff, I'm typing something or writing something, I can kind of I could watch a replay of a game over here and on the side and not be distracted. So yeah, Jez, you got any just thoughts or feelings about the start of the NBA season? Anything that comes to
mind? I mean, I think to your point, I think there's a lot of talent distributed in a way that has not been in a long time. Mm-hmm. I guess this might have been marketing or how they structured it. But, I do remember in the mid to late 80s, you had, almost every team had one good person. Now, every team didn't have 5 good people, but every team had like somebody that was good. Like it might have been the Atlanta Hawks. They had Dominique Wilkins and Doc Rivers. You might have watched the Sacramento Kings with Reggie Theus. You might have watched the Denver Nuggets. And it was Fat Lever and Alex English, right? So back then, you had every team had somebody. That didn't mean that they were going to be the Lakers or the Celtics or the Bulls or the Pistons, right? Those teams usually have 4 or 5 people, right, which made them the reason that they would win, right? I think now you do have a distribution. One of the things I was thinking about when you add on about this, players are playing longer and better. Mm-hmm. So there was a time where some folks had a good run, 12, 13 years, but by the end of their career, they just were not any good, right? But Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James are still playing in the 17 and 18 years.
Yeah.
Right? You have a fair number of players who are still playing deep into their careers, which I also think is something that adds on to the distribution of talent. And then again, also there's this space where talent now is not distributed by a summer league in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, right? Where at one point you could look at basketball and be like, okay, so many of these players are from these places or have some sort of proximity to these places. So whether it's the emergence of LA as a basketball capital, the emergence of like down south, the Atlanta area, to so many places where people play basketball well. I think that's probably the one benefit of the AAU stuff, where like the basketball talent started to be distributed differently.
Yeah.
Because everyone had access to, the kid was good. It was a space for them to be good, where at some point there was not a space to kids to be good if you weren't in certain places.
Absolutely.
And then to say nothing of the global international scene of basketball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which just brings more people into the ability to play basketball well. And so I think that there's something there. I mean, what you get early is obviously, you might start watching the soap operas and try to figure out the soap operas, right? So you try to figure out the Lakers, the Nets, you try to figure out these sagas of who's going to, how are they going to end up?
Mm-hmm.
The Lakers will definitely test the idea of, kind of putting the original gangsters together, putting like that movie Original Gangsters. Like if you put Shaft and all them and Black Caesar and Jim Brown, put them all on a team. Like, can we get one more for the Gipper, so to speak?
Right.
And then the Nets also have the reality of, hey, you have one of the 2 or 3 best point guards in the league not playing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for the team, right? And the team was structured to be, the team was structured for all 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
The team was not structured for just Harden and Durant. It was structured for all 3 of them. So, I think that's something. But to your point, I think games, even generally games that you would not have thought were interesting 4 to 5 years ago, are interesting now. So I do agree that the league has done a good job. And I think within reason, it's also done a good job coming out of the pandemic with its brand intact and being something that people kind of want to watch as we go into this fall.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's interesting, like paying attention to the league, like trying to pay attention a little more closely this early, because typically I think most people that are more casual fans of NBA basketball really come in after, Christmas is the start of the NBA season to most people.
Right.
And I think there's something to be said that, getting 15 to 20 games in is you do get a better sense of who these teams really are. Because you watch the first 4 games of the Lakers and then decide, this the Lakers, the Lakers are going every other game from this is totally going to work to this is not going to work. Like every game is being that's how it's being evaluated, at least. And I think that when you go a little further along, but the other piece, and this is just as observational, like something you may not think about. So like I'm gonna be out the way in a week, and I was like, I was trying to think about what's something that I haven't done, back home that like I've never been to a Giants game live, and I was like, maybe I should try to go to a Giants game. That might be fun. I was like, well, maybe I'll go to a Sixers game because that'd probably be easier to do. Like I've been to some Blazers games, and actually, I guess recently I've had the opportunity, through my work to get access to some tickets. Which is always great when you can get, some of them free community tickets. You know what I'm saying? That's the way to go. Thank you, NBA, for doing that. But I was like, oh man, I can go check the Sixers. I go check the Sixers schedule. And I'm like, the week I'll be there, they play the Knicks and they play the Bucks. I'm like, man, I get to go see Giannis. You know what I'm saying? I might need to go check that out. Because if you've never been to a live NBA game, it's a different thing than, if you like it on TV, but if you got a good seat, at least, especially like you get a better sense of really what, these are very big athletic human beings doing stuff. Like it's not as, it can be a little bit more like, wow, like, way to go, you guys, you know what I'm saying, for working on all that, you know what I mean? And it's not, my thing is not just magical size. It's also like you've spent time working on this because, we can find a whole bunch of people that is big, but they're not good at playing those, at least not that sport, let alone any other sport. Like just because you big don't mean you good. And so as a And as a league, at least I think about it in terms of black men and black community. I mean, it is the league, the most facially visible league. Kind of black men are present, and everyone, you kind of can't hide that who they are. Like they're right there. You see their faces, and they do things. So that idea is sort of proxy for what black men are doing in the world. It's interesting to just try to be in tune with and supportive of it, but also to get a perspective, right? To get a sense of what's happening with that sport. I mean, one other just observational cue, watching more games the last week. I think it's great that people can shoot threes. It's sometimes I really don't want to see nobody shoot a three though. I'm like, it's like, sometimes it's like, yo, man, do some, we can go in there, get in the paint, man, get in there, do something physically awing.
But it's the thing of when people figured out that 3 is better than 2, and it's almost like when the game became, it's like a Billy Ball, right? And when the Oakland A's won, just because if you could, to some degree, you can't get around talent, but if science beats talent when talent ain't there, when talent ain't working hard, right?
Right.
So I think there's a thing where we created a space and then it has filtered down. So at the end of the day, when before it would have developed the skills to go into the hoop, the skills to go into the lane, to take fouls, to do those kind of things, where now it's just like, hey, if you can develop how to shoot enough, this is what this is going to look like. And I think in some ways, as much as I don't like it sometimes, it has democratized the game, because I'm of the estimation that people, as much as people like LeBron, the vast majority of people on the planet see themselves in Steph Curry more than they see themselves in LeBron.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just keep shooting. Right? I can shoot a 3. I can learn to do this. I can't learn to do what LeBron does. I can't learn to pirouette like Kevin Garnett. Right? Like, but I can try really hard to be Steph Curry. And I think it has been a reason why some people have gotten into watching it, and why people across the planet have been like, hey, this is democratized because of the 3. However, I would argue, to your point, I would say those of us who are fans of the game, it has become a bit repetitive, right? Once the science has been figured out.
Yeah. So that's my only critique point. It's like, hey man, and it's my, I just feel that the physicality, the use of your physical skills not being treated as in fact as a skill is just a bit bothersome to me. And maybe it's a myriad issues. Maybe some of those are not, those are maladaptive justice issues. You know what I'm saying? That, I like to play with a shoulder in somebody's chest when I had the ability to do so regularly. Maybe that's a bit of, still holding on to some of the things I enjoyed of the time when I began watching basketball. But it also, maybe just, my own engagement with, enjoyment of martial arts, and that, there is a skill to how you use your body. Like, it's not just like, oh, you got big shoulders, so then it works. But it's like, every team has some giant human that people have moved through life to get them to the NBA. And we know that giant human, who's the same size as the other one, that does all the cool stuff that we like, but he doesn't play like that. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. Because of something that the other one knows. Right. And, but it's been, it's good times. I think, down the line, I might have more, more thoughtful reflections. Maybe we revisit the season as things develop. I have going to put on the record, seeing the Knicks not lose, that has revived a little bit. Like, oh man, I used to root for that team. Man, good for them out there, not being terrible. You know what I mean? Go ahead, Knicks.
Yeah. Like, no, the Knicks tape is a show, man. And I think, people do downplay it, but it brings something back to the league when a team from New York is good. As much as, people could be biased about it, when especially a basketball team from New York, whether it's college or pros, in this case of pros, is good. There's nothing quite like the Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Garden and the Forum have always been those places. And I think that, the Garden and the Forum being those places again is good for the brand of basketball.
Absolutely. So, in a pivot, speaking of New York.
That was a good one, Jess. That was a good one.
Something else that occurred that we wanted to touch on, and I said the content gift that keeps on giving. KRS One, Big Daddy Kane did a versus, and I was able to go back and watch the whole thing. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So when I was, I guess when it was happening and I was watching other people's comments about it, a lot of folks felt Big Daddy won. Then some folks felt that once it was really all the way done, that KRS kind of more won just because he's got more songs, quite frankly, that we would maybe know in terms of his catalog. I don't know. I still don't totally understand how I know how to pick people if people won or didn't win in the versuses. But I would say it was definitely entertaining in the other aspect that surfaced for me, which may not have been the goal, but may have been their goal, is we don't have, and maybe or if we do have, I have not read is much about like what was the interconnected lives of those artists of that time, right? Because they in the show when they kind of speak of like that they want only at least KRS One, he may have been being totally KRS One showman, bullshitting, but I don't think he was. Like this was the only person I would want to do this with, right? Like that me and Big Daddy Kane have this long standing relationship that to my knowledge I wasn't really aware of as like a feature, you know what I'm saying, or it's something that existed, you know what I'm saying? Like when I think of Big Daddy Kane, when I think of KRS One, I don't think of them as like partners or like cats that had like a great relationship with each other or whatever. So I'm, it piqued my curiosity about sort of the relationships of, I mean, like you watch Crush Groove and you got to think that everybody that was down with Def Jam must have been cool with each other, right? Like,
right.
Crush Groove was a movie for you young folks that might be listening or other countries or wherever.
Check it out. Yeah.
Check out Crush Groove. It's like a fictionalized story of the start of Def Jam Records. So that was like just something I thought was kind of interesting and kind of cool to, and knowing that just, they're both touring performers, they do, like the way that classic rock, so to speak, performers go around the country, they're doing the same 4 albums from 74 to 77 or whatever. These hip hop artists actually do a very similar thing. Where if you check your radar, usually one of them might be coming to your town or a town near you,
Right.
So it was sort of that also aspect of like their music isn't necessarily, it's not dead, it's still alive. So I don't know, that's the place where I started with my own thought about the event. What's something that came up for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you said versus is the content gift that keeps on giving. I think they're going to post this. What they do next is going to be a really interesting place because in some senses, I think from the beginning of it to this one that just happened, you could kind of put a end chapter, like chapter end, right? Now they got verses when Super Cat's performing. They got verses where they're going to do gaming shows, right? So the brand is going to expand. And so I think it's going to be an interesting space to see, does the brand expand to the point where you're like, that is not what I'm expecting anymore. Versus like versus pardon the pun, I'm getting quality content that even though outside is open, millions or hundreds of thousands of people will still watch this on the internet, which is also something to think about. Like, unless you get the app, you're watching it on the internet.
Yeah.
Like you're not like, it's not like on HBO Max. It's not on Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not on the antenna somewhere.
It's not on your antenna. Right. Exactly. It's not on your antenna. And so, I just think that that's an interesting part of it and what they do next and who they have perform next. the genre of music, the type, I think is going to be interesting because I think you know, they got a boost, of course, with Jada and D Block, the Locks and Dipset. Um, then I think they tried to carry the energy with Fat Joe and Ja Rule, and that had its own challenges for a couple of different reasons. And then this KRS One and Big Daddy Kane, I think, performed in a way that one would expect. So that's one thing. I think both of their musics have aged well. Big Daddy Kane appears to age better because he's a better showman.
Yeah.
Right? Like he is still performing in a way that you do not think a 50-something-year-old man would necessarily be performing. You know what I mean?
Just
straight up.
Yeah. He definitely got that like a big of a different age, like the old like blues singer, like traveling musician, kind of like I'm still out here, baby. We do we do 10 shows. You know what I'm saying? We do 7 shows a month.
Like,
you know what I'm saying? I'm in 12
I am
cities.
dancing. Like I am dancing, Jack. I am jumping up and down. I am saying all my lyrics, right? He is doing something that the vast majority of current artists who don't do fast songs can't do.
Yeah.
So there is also something there about showmanship that I think hip hop, as owing to some degree of authenticity, and I'm putting that in air quotes, has lost, because now we are privileging the fact that you're real and come to perform with your shirt off or some variation of something over the fact that you have come to give me a show. Right. And so that authenticity, how much you like this person has overtaken if is the person moving on stage, are they, just any of that kind of stuff. My personal perspective on it was that Big Daddy Kane did win because his showmanship and performance, doing his old freestyles, doing new stuff, right? It was altogether a better show. The average hip hop fan didn't know some of Big Daddy Kane's B-sides and other stuff. So I think that's when you start getting into the Wrath of Kane and all this other stuff. Yeah, you had to be a real hip hop fan to like know the Wrath of Kane word for word. Right. And so, that's where I think people were like, KRS won. And it's like, I don't really think KRS won. I just think, and again, his showmanship to bring those songs to life, I think suffered a bit. You know what I mean? And so that's why I'm judging them on, right? I'm not judging them on like the power of the song and all this kind of stuff. I'm judging like, okay, I like all these songs, but like, you're going to do it, and what's going to make me actually enjoy watching, because I don't enjoy watching old school artists. I enjoy listening to old school songs, but I'm real. I don't enjoy watching them, except for Kane, right? Besides that, it's like, man, that's what they got Spotify for. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what they got videos for, Jack. Like, I don't have to, I'm not going to be, listen, I will go see the Whispers. First of all, shout out to Snoop Dogg for having the Whispers perform Olivia at his birthday party last week. I just want to insert that for the fact that anybody that, for true music lovers, Olivia is a classic song. That's, you and I both share a deep love for that song.
Straight up.
He wants to buy a new Seville. Oh, anyway. So like, you know what I mean? Like,
your body, use your brains.
Yeah. No, listen, he said at the grandmother's house, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Who am I to change the ways? Now she's turned down. Ooh, man, it's a cautionary tale, Jack. But so I'm not going to go see Chubb Rock, Kwame, Big Daddy Kane, KRS One, and Special Ed perform. I'm not going.
Yeah,
I have soundtracks for all of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have, your Bad Chubbs and all the Chubb Rock songs, treat them right. Those are classics. You and I both know those got a lot of play on the radio. Them Saturday nights we listen to the radio at the house as teenagers. And young, you know what I mean? DAS when they was having that party night down on Delaware Avenue. So So yeah, so I mean, I think it was really good. I think it was good for a, it is good that they are able to expose people to music that wouldn't have a reason to be heard today.
Yeah. I think the other
You know
thing,
what I'm saying?
yeah. And observationally, the one other challenge, like, and I think I talked to Horn about this after. I was like, or I think he called me when I was watching it, and it was like 2.5 hours. That's a long ass show. Like I like a good show, but 2.5 hours, that's a hell of a commitment, man. Like you got to really give me the, like, it's like, damn, all right, man. I mean, I start looking around, like, I mean, landing my drink, like, my drink. I'm, 2.5 hours is like, whew, like
it's a commitment.
But that's a lot of time, man. Like I don't, I imagine for folks that go to the, as they're putting these together. I mean, sure, there's definitely a level of novelty to being there, and some people I think just have a, and of like, I think it was actually, who was I talking to? We were talking. I think we were talking to one of my children, and around going to a show and like you gotta wait and hoping that when's the artist gonna start, and like are they gonna start on time, or are they just gonna start whenever, and like there's nothing figuring out the timing. If they say the show starts at doors open at 9, right, but that don't mean nothing that there may not be no performance till 11, depending on the structure, right? Like where you go into like a ballroom type situation now, and like a whatever your what's it, the Met or the Man Theater, or like, some of those places where they like, look, we, shows over here, 30 minutes in, the performances start, like, because that's how this works. But even in some of them settings, there's some artists who are notorious and famous for their, show don't start till whenever they happen to show up and start.
When they show up, right.
Yeah, I mean, and like, it is a lot to ask. And so there are some pieces of it where it's like, yeah, you can kind of be in all the way and you might kind of drift away from what's happening, and then they bring you back. You know what I'm saying? So you can, or like, at least for me watching it after the fact, was like, let me pause this and go here and, make my little snack, and I'm gonna come back, or let me go, deal with the body, as they say, or take a phone call, and and then go back to enjoying the rest of the show and the performance and seeing where they go. I did like structurally how they sort of were coming back and forth off the stage. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Where they've had the other ones where everybody was just sort of sitting there, and you got, you had what's the name, Earth, Wind and Fire looking at the Ozzy brothers singing, and then vice versa, like where it gets a little like, I mean, I would think as performers, if you're on a stage, you feel like you should be doing something, right? Like they would be a little bit strange feeling just sitting there, which begs the question to me, as they go forward with this again, how do you bring some artists to the stage? How would they would they fit within sort of the way the format goes? But it was still pretty, it was cool to see, brothers, is alive and kicking, and in the light of just the whoever thought hip hop would take it this far, type energy. Like, I don't think Big Daddy Kane, we didn't really have, I mean, Karis One hasn't had, neither one of us put out like a new, I don't know, maybe they have, and I didn't hear it, new record, but I don't necessarily need them to put out no new record.
Right.
But the idea that, like, the people who were kids and were young when this was young, like, still get to go see him. You know what I mean? It's like, and I do know people that, our peers and contemporaries who they're all on board for all of the old school rapper shows. They're like, yo, I'm about to go see Too Short right now. You know what I'm saying? I got a dear friend. Too Short is in town. They going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think it's good because America eats us young, right? America constantly just replays history, and I think also the fact that how America does, and then hip hop is such a young person's sport, which then creates this idea of trying to remain forever young, right? Like not letting your facial hair show, or you're 50 trying to look 30, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So there are parts of it that don't allow people to mature. And I think the idea of the parts of it that don't allow people to mature, the fact of being able to really see old school people. I mean, for some people, Dipset and D Block were old school, right?
Right.
So in this sense, this was like Methuselah. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? This was Old Testament. If that's old school, this was Old Testament. But I think that's good for people to get access to Black music, to hip hop, framing it in a way that you and I both are fans of music that came out before we were born or around the time we were born, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are fans of that music. And then you go back to learn about music that came out in the 30s and the 20s and the 50s, right? I think that's good for hip hop, for people to see it kind of sponsored or see it saluted by Swiss Beats, by Timberland, which gives it like, okay, you watch Versus, right? So I do think that it's a good thing for our music to be able to have that re-exposure to new crowds that may not have been as into it, but then can appreciate it as something from the beginning years. I mean, looking at it now, right? You figure if you chronicle hip hop as beginning in 79 and some of that stuff is in 89, then you're talking about music in the first 10 years of an art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which by any stretch of the imagination is the beginning of the canon.
Yeah.
Right? We just happened to be born during the time of the beginning of the canon. So for us, you know, you always had this idea that old school was always 4 or 5 years before you, right? So people would be like, "Oh yeah, that's that old school. That's that Kool Moe Dee and Busy Bee. That's 82."
Right.
And then at some point it was like 88 was old school.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, if something came out of 95, 96 is old school. And that was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, right? So, you know, I just think that it's good for the music, and willfully it allows people to frame hip hop as beyond just a young person's sport, and it's part of a generational context of Black music.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's always dope if that being on led some folks who weren't really familiar, like maybe they heard some of the things that have trickled up from those artists, you know, but they ain't really never listened. If they went back, you know, and got some spins on the various apps on which one can listen to music you don't personally own, but you got access to. And if some of them went and actually bought some records, you know, from them individuals, that'd be, you know, that would always be a benefit. So, you know, thank you, Versus. Way to go. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. Let's see what y'all do next. And I don't know I'm gonna watch it in video games, but we'll see.
Right. They're gonna do video games.
Well, they got it's like a Versus gaming side of it, because it's all off the Triller app, right? So
right.
You know, and e-gaming is so big. So that's one of the things I saw.
I mean, does that mean I get to bust somebody up at Tecmo Super Bowl? Because
well, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if they're gonna go old school. They're gonna be playing these like killer person games. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know what games they're gonna be necessarily playing. But I do think, you know, again, the fact that they did a Super Cat concert the night before, right? And just like Super Cat at the Garden, just on the strength of Triller and Versus, right? So I think it's clear that they're going to start branching out, but keeping the brand secure while being able to do, you know, also do something that's financially viable, because, you know, they sold the company, so it makes sense. So welcome to American capitalism. You sell your company. But yeah.
All right. So I mean, with that, I think, you know, we can that you got something for the good of the order. You can say,
no, sir.
All right. Peace. Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, Majestic. We try to record as regularly as we can, and you can support the podcast, number one, by listening and sharing. Number two, by subscribing and rating on Apple Podcasts and also anywhere else that you happen to listen. But Apple Podcasts especially, that tends still to be the real important one. Other than that, you know, we are amongst the autumn weather, a little wet, a little chilly. So, stay safe, stay warm. You can also stay warm by, you can still buy the old hoodie on the Etsy shop. All proceeds go to offsetting the cost to keep this production rolling. Also, you can become a patron. Just search Justice Rajee on Patreon. You'll find the page and find a level that works for you. Yeah. So with that, I'm not going to make it too heavy. I'm going to be out of here. So y'all be safe. Thank you for listening. Peace.